All right, today is July 19, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes Storage Special Interest Group. As a reminder, this meeting is public, recorded, and posted on YouTube. So if you have anything that you want to discuss, please feel free to add it to the agenda. High level, we're going to go over status for the different features that we're tracking for the current release. Then we're going to discuss any PRs that need attention, bugs that we want to discuss, and finally design reviews. So let's kick it off by taking a look at the planning spreadsheet and doing a review of the features that we're tracking for this release. We have a lot of them. I'm going to skip over the CSI driver statuses because there's a lot of CSI drivers and they're not going to be in tree. So we can get an end of quarter status at the end of the quarter instead of doing a weekly or bi-weekly update on them. So first up is implementing out of tree volume snapshot and restore controller.
Hi, yeah, so we had a few design meetings, had some good discussions, and the design spec was being reviewed and updated. We also submitted the snapshot API code PR, and that was being reviewed as well. So we are hoping to get the snapshot API part settled so that we can continue to make changes to the controller. And the controller code was also submitted. It's just, it's dependent on the snapshot API right now. And we also have Travis enabled on the external snapshotter repo, thanks to Luis.
Nice. All right, so it sounds like solid progress on the snapshotting work. Thank you for that, Xing.
Thanks.
We're going to skip over the CSI driver and go to CSI entry cluster plugin registration mechanism. This is something that Jan has been leading. He's held a couple of meetings on it already. Jan, do you want to give folks an update on it? Looks like he's not on the call today. I can try and give an update on his behalf. So the meetings were discussing whether a registration mechanism is necessary or not, and if so, what would it look like? Would it be a CRD? Would it be an entry object? Could we even reuse the existing node objects? At the moment, we're leaning towards doing a first-class entry object. Jan is planning on putting together a proposal for SIG architecture to see what their thoughts on it are. And based on that, we'll proceed from there. Next feature is skipping external attach detach for non-attachable volumes for CSI. This has a dependency on the plugin registration mechanism. If the plugin registration mechanism goes in, this feature can use that mechanism. Otherwise, we'll have to come up with something else here. So it's waiting on number 5 to get unblocked. Next up is the mount library. Travis, do you want to give an update here?
Sure, yeah. I did sync up with Michelle yesterday. We chatted a little bit and we agreed on an approach to it. The idea here actually was to kind of do it in 2 parts. Take the existing mount utility that's in package util mount and refactor it into 2 pieces. Right now, the mounter interface has lots of generic code, but also a lot of Kubernetes specific utilities. And so we wanted to refactor that into 2 pieces so that basically the Kubernetes stuff is a separate library. And then the second step would be to move that generic interface and implementation out of Kubernetes into a different package. So I'm starting on that now. I'll probably send lots of questions on Slack and the mailing list as we go, but
awesome.
The one thing I wanted to ask in this meeting was based on that, I don't really think this needs a feature issue. It's mostly a refactor.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine. We can track it as a bug.
Okay.
That should not be yellow, but we can take a look at that offline. Next up is local volume dynamic provisioning. Michelle, do you want to give an update here?
Yeah, there's basically two things going on here in parallel. One is we need to figure out a way to report capacity per node for the dynamic provisioning part. That part I am trying to look at, although I may need some assistance because I have a lot of things on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of this is to investigate if we can implement the local volume plugin part as a CSI driver. It seems like the Mesos team has already written a LVM-based CSI driver, so we're trying to see if we can leverage that in any way.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Thank you, Michelle. If anybody is interested in helping with the design of capacity reporting, please reach out to Michelle or say something on this call, and we'll reach out to you. All right, we're going to skip over the driver for iSCSI and talk about the iSCSI common library. Is John Griffith on the line by any chance? Okay, we'll sync up with him next time then. Next up is inline volume support. So this is a feature for CSI where CSI currently is only accessible through PV/PVC, but for ephemeral volumes, ideally we want it to be accessible through inline. But at the same time, we don't really want attachable volumes to be accessible inline. So it puts us in a weird spot, and the design here is to come up with a solution. Jan has a proposal out. Please take a look at it and provide feedback. Currently, it's outstanding, waiting feedback. Okay. Next up is the CSI spec having workload information passed to the node publish call. This was one of the items we believe we need for a specific type of volumes that require pod identity. And we're trying to work through those use cases at the moment. We had a CSI community call yesterday where we discussed this at length. The CSI community is a little bit hesitant on adding in a generic workload hook because it's unique to Kubernetes, and we're trying to look at what is absolutely required from our side, and if we can get away with doing it without having to modify CSI. Jan had some interesting ideas after yesterday's meeting, so keep an eye out for that. Next up is the CSI entry, adding support for dynamic max volume per node count. Actually, let's see. Yeah. Hemant, do you want to give an update on this one?
Yes, sorry. So we got the CSI spec merged for, we are going to have a call on Monday. Like we do have a general consensus about it. We had a call about CSI driver registry on, I don't know, like last Monday. And the idea is like, we have a general consensus how to proceed, but we have some remaining items that we need to figure out, like how to take into account. So we are going to have a follow-up call on Monday, and we'll discuss some of the implementation details, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
The outstanding items are basically like how to reconcile volume limit with capacity constraints that are there on the node, and delayed binding versus volume limit application scheduler, and yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that update. And next one is also you, CSI spec, adding volume usage specs to the metric.
Yeah, so we had a call CSI in the CSI community meeting yesterday, and we agreed on the broader approach of not calling it matrix, but calling it like capacity information that will expose both the inodes available, bytes available that we have currently. And I'll open a proposal in CSI to expose that capacity information, a new RPC call at the node level, and that can be used by Kubernetes and other CEOs.
Cool.
Aren't oh sorry, question. Are inodes available as like a node property, not really a plugin property?
The inodes could be faced from the using statfs call. So that's a node property where the node is hosted. The capacity though is not, depends on how the volume, what type of the volume is. So the plugin will report both, and it will report from the node. So
I think what you were saying, Hemant, was that we could get it from the node side, but there's a couple of different utilities that can be used to fetch it. And if we were to do it on the Kubernetes side, we may not know which one to use.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. And I do agree with Michelle's point that the inode could be used, could be calculated by the statfs call, but the other, like the capacity may or may not be like 100% accurate depending on which call to use.
Yeah, I agree. Capacity, usage capacity makes sense at the plugin level, but I'm not sure about inodes, because if you have multiple plugins on a node, what does it mean for that each of them reports some free inodes?
It's not plugin level; it's per volume level, right? The inodes reporting. So if the same plugin has like 10 volume, they all report different inode available and used, as we do currently. I'm just trying to think why is that a problem?
I might be misunderstanding, but isn't the inode limit a like OS property, like maximum inodes on the whole node?
It's not max. We don't.
File systems can run out of inodes before they run out of bytes if you create huge numbers of small files.
Right.
It's because of the way that file systems allocate, the tables on disk. The tables have to make an assumption about the average file size. So if you make files below the average file size, you can be unable to create new files even though you got plenty of free space.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Thanks.
All right, thanks. And
I had a quick concern about the inodes. So for Windows, they do not typically report anything like inodes. It's like different data structures, and it's not really part of the capacity usage information. So if you want to support inode information in CSI, would it make sense to make it more generic?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So let's have this conversation in the PR when I open it today or tomorrow. Tomorrow is my target for opening the PR. I have some code written, so I would like it to be obviously the OS agnostic as much as possible.
Yep, that's great feedback, Deep. And please review the PR whenever it does come out to ensure that it is compatible with what Windows has as well.
Thank you.
Next up is dynamic max capacity per plugin per node count for Intree and CSI.
All right. So this is, I think, this is the one that I was talking about earlier, like the things that are left to be discussed, because certain volume types, not only there's a limit, a count of how many volumes you can attach, but there's also how much you can attach, a capacity related constraint. So I think this is kind of like, I'm sorry. Yeah, so.
We've had some other requirements come up around this too. Saad, just to be upfront, we kind of discussing some of this stuff internally before we
Okay.
come back to the,
Yeah, so we're gonna have a call on Monday, and then we'll decide how to approach this one. So, and then we'll.
Cool. Also, please make sure that you have feature repo issues opened if you have a feature assigned, especially if it's red over here.
So should we create a new feature repo? There's already obviously for what volume limit. I'm just thinking if we should just.
If it's a completely different feature or it can be construed as a different feature, then yes. If it's mostly the same feature, I'd say just reuse the existing one.
Do CSI only features need feature issues?
If they are completely external, they do not. If they are adding functionality to the core, then they will. Think of it as, do you need, for example, documentation in the core Kubernetes for this feature? If yes, then make sure you have a feature repo. Okay, next up is adding support for volume expansion to the CSI spec.
Yeah, there's a spec already out, but there's like at least like I think there's a couple of items that are one item that is pending is whether the online the capability of what kind of expansion the volume plugin supports online versus offline, whether it should be exposed as a capability or not. That one is not quite nailed down yet, and I think that's where the main this thing is. We had a discussion last week in CSI. This week we didn't talk about this particular thing, but the plan is to I'll update the PR and the discussion will continue on the PR actually. So, yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you, Haman. Moving on, we have a few CSI drivers, which I am going to skip over. If you are a feature owner of a CSI driver, please continue to work on it and we'll get a status update near the end of the quarter. CSI library, the CIFS common library. Deep, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I spoke to Andy Zhang about it from Microsoft, and there was just agreement that, yeah, it would be nice to have. Okay. So we can go ahead and do it, I guess.
Okay.
But the primary consumer would be just the Azure file driver.
Cool, sounds good. And it's still okay to leave you as the primary assignee there?
Sure.
Okay, sounds good. And then we have block support for Windows.
Right, for this, in SIG Windows, I think the decision was pretty much that there was no concrete use case where this would be used in Windows. And since the support doesn't exist, it'll take a bit of work apparently to surface the block devices to the Windows containers. So as a result, unless there's like an explicit customer requirement or a use case around it, the support is probably not going to be there.
Okay, that's interesting. Are there any databases that depend on raw block devices in Windows?
Right. So I think SQL Server, being one of the primary use cases, can work pretty well on files. And in fact, I think they recommend that you deploy it on a volume with a file system, specifically NFS. So from that perspective, the priority from Windows goes down quite a bit.
I see. Okay. Fair enough. So we'll go ahead and scratch it for this quarter then. And if anybody believes that block support for Windows is more critical, please speak up. Next up are the CSI drivers, which we're going to skip over, and then CSI external provisioner, topology support for Kubernetes to CSI. This is the external provisioner. Chang, do you want to give an update on this? Let me see if Chang is on the line. Looks like he's not currently on the call, so we'll skip over that and get an update from him next time. We're going to skip over the CSI driver, and then we have fiber channel common library. Brad, do you have any updates on this?
It's still in progress. We're still sifting through the best way to approach this.
Okay. And we've got the NFS driver, and then NFS common library assigned to Ben. Ben, do you have any updates?
Well, I've only started looking at this in detail this week, so I don't know for sure, but my suspicion is that it probably, there's no reason to believe yet that it's going to be needed at all. It's just the mount. So if that changes, I should find out soon, because I'm really spending a lot of time with the CSI NFS driver this week.
Perfect. All right, thanks a lot, Ben. Next up is the Flex Resize support. Anket, are you on the line?
Yes. Yes, hi. So this is in progress. I've discussed the overall approach and some of the earlier things with Hemant on Slack, and I'm continuing with the implementation and some of the testing. So hopefully soon I'll be able to create a PR where we can have a more detailed review and rest of the inputs.
Awesome.
Aniket, like one of the things that we'll have to do is like we'll have to drop the. All right, I think we'll have to drop the check from the admission controller so that flex volume can be accommodated for resizing. We can talk this offline.
Okay, sure thing. Sure.
Okay.
All right. Volume expansion for entry to GA. We added this as an item. Is this something that we still want to do, or are you going to push it off to next quarter?
We don't know like yet. Like I think.
Yeah, I think it's fair to bump this to next quarter, considering we just moved it to beta.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and remove that for this quarter. And then for the online volume expansion, thoughts?
I think you would want to move it because it improves the user experience pretty well. But yeah, so
okay.
And features don't tend to get a lot of testing when they're not in enabled. So leaving them in alpha makes them pretty much unused actually sometimes.
Yeah, so Saad, we'll take that. We haven't figured out exactly who will lead that on our side, but we'll do the work.
Okay.
Yeah, I can review it and help out, I think.
Cool. So we'll leave the owner unassigned.
Yeah, Hemant to review. Just put me as lead for now.
Okay.
All right. Also, block storage to beta. Did that fall off this list somehow?
That's a good question. Let's see. Block. You got block storage for Windows. Yeah, how did that fall off? I remember discussing it at some point.
Someone secretly hates block storage.
All right, so that's going to beta. That's a P1.
Matthew Wong was the developer.
Okay. And what's the status of that?
In progress.
Cool.
Saad, I think a bunch of topology stuff also fell off.
Yeah, I was about to comment on that.
Okay, I think there's some funny hidden cell business going on over here because I see this go from 53 to. So I remember there's some way to unhide that. Let's see if I could figure it out.
Should we switch to Bing Sheets?
I think they call it Excel.
Excel? Wow.
Good job, Brad. Good job. God, I'm never good with spreadsheets. Anybody know how to unhide these hidden cells? All right, I'll sort that out offline, and the rest of them will get updated next time, I guess. Call it technical difficulties. If someone can figure it out offline, let me know. And whoever hit it, shame on you. Going back to the agenda, we have PRs to discuss or that need attention. Ben has one out that should have been merged for 111.
Well, yeah. I only bring it up because I don't understand like what didn't go right here, because the code was more or less ready for 111, and it was sort of late in the release. So, I mean, I'm not super mad it didn't merge, but I want to know like what should I have done? Should I have been poking people personally on the side?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Most of their approvers just have so many PRs that they need to look at. If they're not getting poked, they're not going to pay attention to it.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I'll start poking people more aggressively then to try to get things moving. I have another PR for related iSCSI multipath bug filed by the same guy.
Okay.
That hasn't gone upstream yet, but
and it looks like Jan is more or less on board with this, so this shouldn't be too difficult to get to merge.
Okay.
All right, cool. Next up are bugs that need attention. Looks like we don't have any at the moment. And then there's a couple of designs, one from Michelle about conformance testing. Michelle, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so basically we are trying to look into ways we can run a lot of our persistent volume tests in conformance suites. So I've drafted together an idea in the bug. Oh, I guess I should share or something. Let's see. Can I share my screen? I don't think so. Oh, yes. Okay. All right. Sorry. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's go here. Okay, so to basically summarize the idea so far, the idea is to have 3 different conformance suites where we can test volume plugins in. The first suite is the standard core conformance suite that all Kubernetes distros have to pass in order to be Kubernetes conformant. We already have some tests here for ephemeral volumes. As part of this, we can evaluate if there are more test cases we should add to the ephemeral volumes, such as the subpath feature and maybe some, I'm not sure, maybe some node failure handling cases. Some new ideas that I had of test cases that could fit in core performance are PVC features that don't require a specific volume plugin to actually test. So these are things like pre-binding or static binding, the PV protection feature, testing the retain, reclaim policies, some things like that. So that's the basic idea behind the first suite. Then there's the second suite, which I am calling the persistent volume plugin profile. This is the profile suite, I think, is basically a concept where it's not strictly required for Kubernetes conformance, but it can be some optional additional conformance suite that Kubernetes distributions can optionally conform to. So here, the basic idea about the persistent volume profile suite is to test features that every persistent volume plugin must support. This I've kind of clumped in things here like just basic reading and writing of data, data persistence when a pod restarts, and also data persistence with various different node failure conditions. So those kind of things that like basic functionality that every plugin should support can go here. And the idea with this profile suite is that distributions can bundle one or more persistent volume plugins by default in order to conform to this profile suite. And then the third category of tests is basically this is sort of like the everything else suite, where we test a lot of features that not all volume plugins may support, but these features are important from the user's perspective when they want to evaluate different volume types and figure out which volume plugin is the best to fit their use cases. So I've clumped in some categories, features here, like you can have tests that are specific to read, write once volumes, and then you can have a different set of tests for read, write many volumes. This is where like snapshot tests could go in the future, volume resizing and dynamic provisioning, block, and all of that. And this would be sort of, since these are optional features, they're just more of a, it's sort of more of a check mark if a volume plugin supports this or not.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
Attach, detach, failure recovery.
Yeah.
That's a big one, it seems like. Is that, do you consider that rolled up under the second bullet? Or was
I would consider it under the third bullet because not all volume plugins support attach and detach. The other thing is that I'm trying to see if we can focus the test cases from the user's perspective and not so much like the volume plugin perspective. So from a user's perspective, they don't actually care if a volume supports attach or detach. What they care about is that their data is accessible, during various failure scenarios. So,
right. That the pod recovers, right? We want to make sure that the recovery is correct.
Yes, that's correct. So I want to formulate some of these test cases from the pod perspective and also like the node perspective. So like, say like the pod can recover if it gets rescheduled on a different node, or it can recover if the node fails, or it can recover if the node reboots, test cases like that.
Yep, I love that. So like zap the node and it should be able to recover.
Yes. Deep, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just kind of agreeing with the node failure conditions because that's also a scenario, I guess, when attach comes into the picture.
Yeah.
I guess I was wondering, like, maybe these are covered in more details elsewhere, like how exactly would the node failure conditions be driven?
Yeah, I think there's right now, I just have like a really rough idea right now of like possible scenarios to test. I think when we actually go and investigate writing these test cases, we can actually work out those details.
That's good.
So I have a spreadsheet that I started drafting some more specific test cases, although right now the spreadsheet's also pretty generic and not very detailed. But I think the idea is each kind of common class of test cases we want to add, we can open up an issue for that, and then we can work out more of the details of exactly what the test needs to do and how to propagate or how to trigger some of those failures. So if you guys have any ideas of more test cases that we can add, feel free to add them to the spreadsheet. I've given SIG Storage edit capabilities. So as long as you're part of the SIG Storage mailing list, you should be able to edit this. The other thing I wanted to double check with you guys is, does this breakdown of conformance suites make sense? Or is there some other way you might think structuring the suites might work better?
It makes sense to me. What about, is it okay to add a couple like different workload,
Yes.
tests here? Okay.
I definitely think like workload integration should be part of this too. I forgot where I put it. I might have put it under optional features. Or did I put it under, maybe I put on the second one. I had like one bullet point about stateful sets. Yeah, workloads. We can potentially add some more things here and, flesh it out a little more.
Yeah, there's batch and then long running, right? Batch seems
yeah.
to get overlooked often.
So like jobs, deployments. Sure.
I'm not sure we should put disruptive test, this performance, because if I have a Kubernetes cluster and run a conformance test, then I probably don't want to reboot my nodes or reboot something. So all these detach issues we have, they are mostly caused by the restarting Kubernetes, restarting the detach controller.
Yeah, I think we'll have to think about it. Like from a user's perspective, it's definitely important from a user that like their volume is going to behave properly in disruptive scenarios. We'll have to see. We might not be able to run it. We might need to make changes to the way that conformance tests are run to be able to allow disruptive tests.
Okay.
Oh, and like all of this, and this is sort of like a high-level plan of like what we can do with conformance tests. In order to actually add these, I think we're going to need to make a lot of changes to our existing tests and the existing framework we use in order to make it easier to just plug in arbitrary volume plugins and run it, because right now the volume plugins are sort of hard-coded into our tests. So I think the E2E test framework, in order to enable these conformance tests, will be a whole nother large feature that we'll need people to help work on.
Michelle, get with me on that because I have some people that want to help.
Okay, awesome. And I think also Patrick has also expressed interest in working on the test framework. So we can try to all sync up.
It would be nice if CSI plugged into this really easily, right?
Yes. So I think maybe as a first phase, we might just want to figure out how to restructure our E2E test to make it easy to plug in any CSI driver. And then we can consider if we need to or want to extend that for the injury volume types. Okay, so that's all I have on this topic. If there are no further questions, we can move on.
Oh, one other question. Will this,
Yep.
So are we only going to test with like 1.13 on, or is there any hope to go like 112, 111?
Assuming, well, this theoretically is just E2E test changes. Like we're not making changes to the Kubernetes core code in order to enable this. So theoretically, if we, write this, we can potentially run the tests against older clusters too. I think that's possible. I think from a conformance point of view, I don't think they allow like backporting conformance tests to previous releases.
Right. But what I'm concerned about, or what I'd like to do is, if we have a bug that comes in on 1.3 or something, go and see if it, write the test case for it, and then go see if it existed in other versions using some conformance test suite.
Yeah, I think definitely the test framework could be made to like work against other, different Kubernetes releases. I think that's fine, so that we can for conformance, it might only run against the latest Kubernetes releases, but for just a testing point of view, we can certainly run these tests against the releases.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Quick question, and these conformances, are they part of a bigger conformance suite, or is it just storage?
So for the first type, which is the core conformance suite, that is part of the main conformance suite that has like all the Kubernetes features. But the persistent volumes profile and the optional feature suites, those will be run on a per plugin basis. So those suites would be run separately from the others.
Okay.
And it's the responsibility of the plugin owner to make sure they're conformant.
I think it's more, so I don't think we have like there's no plugin certification. So all of this has to be tested against a Kubernetes distro. So I think it's up to the Kubernetes distributions to choose which volume plugins they want to test for conformance and say that, certify that this volume plugin works well on their environment. Obviously, if there's a bug in the plugin itself, the Kubernetes distribution will have to work with the storage vendor to fix that. All right. So if that's all the questions, if you have more questions, feel free to ping me on the issue or ping me on Slack or anything to discuss further. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot, Michelle. It's a super important effort for Kubernetes going forward because it dictates what Kubernetes is. Thank you for that. Next up is Jan. Jan has a session on volume plugin tests. Jan?
Okay, thanks. I will try to share my screen. It's complicated. I have a PR out there where, how do I hide this? Where I went through the existing E2E tests we have in Kubernetes for storage. I went through the cloud for the volume plugins that are cloud-based. We have a bunch of tests for Amazon, Azure, GCP, OpenStack, and SIG. And vSphere, we don't have any for Azure File, but it seems nobody cares. And then I went through the test job that actually runs the test. And then it gives a different picture because we test AWS and we test GCP. We don't run any tests on Azure. We don't test OpenStack. We don't test vSphere. I know that VMware runs a bunch of their own tests, end-to-end tests, and they are fixing the bugs and pushing PRs. But I don't know if Microsoft or somebody who cares about OpenStack runs the tests. But I don't think I can do anything here. I hope Microsoft does run the tests.
Yeah, I in fact spoke about that. Like I came across that omission too, and I spoke to Andy Zhang again from Microsoft, and he said like they apparently run it sort of out of band, maybe kind of like the vSphere model, in that they run it against ACS engine in their own setup. It's not part of the PR process.
Okay. And I'm not sure if anybody runs OpenStack tests. But I don't think I can influence it. But so I focus on the in3 volume plugins. We have again a bunch of tests for some of them. Some of them are not tested at all, like Flocker, like Photon, like
I think
Portwork.
Flocker died.
Yeah.
I know. Like Storage OS, there is no test there. And I looked at, for the test we have, I looked which do we run, and we run quite a lot of them, but we don't run Ceph, we don't run iSCSI and Ceph RBD. And I would like to run them because we have the technology, it's open source, we can run it, nothing is preventing us, except for the images that run the end-to-end tests. So far, all the tests run on GCI, which is immutable. It has very limited kernel modules, a very limited list of kernel modules. It's not possible to install iSCSI utilities there, and so on. So I thought about it, how to run it. And I found a couple of issues, like the Ceph server image we use for testing is wrong, the iSCSI image is wrong, but I am fixing them. But if we add a new job that would run all the tests we have, including Ceph and iSCSI, we could run these tests. If the job runs Ubuntu instead of GCI, I noticed that a couple of other test jobs already run Ubuntu, so it shouldn't be a problem. So we get the necessary kernel modules. And we also have the possibility to run the mount utilities like iSCSI ADM or Ceph RBD utilities inside containers and not to have them on the host. So this way we could run the tests in some end-to-end test job with every commit or at least once a day. It requires a couple of changes, mostly in the test framework we use. For example, I need to add new parameter to end-to-end test binary that will run the containers with mount utilities on every host before the test starts. So the test itself expects that the mount utilities are available somewhere. If somebody wants to install to run the tests on its own machine with the utilities on the host, it can run it. And in the same way, somebody can run the test on its own host with the mount utility in the container. So I want the test not to care where it runs. That's why I need to end-to-end test suite to care. Well, so I need the job. I need the new parameter, and basically that's it. So what I need here is somebody from SIG Storage to review this from the SIG Storage perspective, because I will run all the tests that have SIG Storage tag, and I need to skip all the disruptive because on Ubuntu, it's not so simple to restart kubelet, I think. I will skip the flaky, I will skip the serial because that would slow everything down. But I will include all slow tests. I did some measurement. It will take 16 minutes, 16 minutes to run all the tests, including the slow one. Everything runs in parallel. Yeah, and everything works. So again, what I need here is somebody from SIG Storage to review this. If it is a good thing to do, this will run only the tests which we have right now. In the future, I can imagine that we can extend the tests and the coverage and, I don't know, run for example, subpath tests for iSCSI and for Ceph RBD, and to run, I don't know what, FS group tests and all the features we run. We test with other volumes, which we could test also with the iSCSI and Ceph. And maybe in the future, we could also add some tests for Portworx or for Storage OS and the storage vendors which care about Kubernetes. I know that Flocker died. I haven't heard from Storage OS for a long time. Maybe we can get some stripped down version of Portworx image to test with here. But that's out of the scope of this. This is just paving the path and running all the tests we have already.
So the only, I guess, controversial part of this is adding the new flag to E2eGo?
Yeah.
And
well, yes, and the new job.
And the new job.
The job has, well, this is kind of
okay.
Usual, but I need to include feature volumes
in
the test and all the other features out. And the Go regular expressions doesn't have possibility of negating something, so I must have this ugly regular expression there. But okay, that's the only way.
Don't we already have a SIG storage job? That
we have.
We don't have a SIG storage job, but we have in the test grid a SIG storage page that filters test results by SIG storage.
And okay, and in this case, we need a separate job because these tests are going to require special setup, which the other tests don't.
Yeah.
Okay. And question about the flag. Why don't we just have the first step of the test deploy the daemon set? Why have a flag to the framework to deploy the daemon set?
Because I don't want to deploy the daemon set in all tests.
Can you somehow have it do it as part of the test to determine which test needs it and just have that test deploy it so that you don't need the flag?
I thought about it, and this is tricky because I could detect that there are no mount utilities available, but is it a bug? Because somebody runs the test and wants to check that his cluster supports FRBD, or should I inject the?
Could we do something ugly like have a common method that all the storage methods will run, and every test must pass true or false to it, and if it's true, then we install it, and then the test itself has to determine if it should install the utility, and it'll have to implement logic like if I am running this test with this specific driver, then I will require utility.
Frankly, I find the one command line option much easier, easier to understand, to implement, and also very explicit.
Yeah, I just don't know what kind of pushback.
There is no magic.
I think I'm fine with it. If we get pushback on it, I think we might need to think about alternatives. So, okay, that looks good to me.
Just a quick question: how does that line up with the effort of getting entry drivers out? I mean, we have that going on as well. Does that make this worthwhile?
Yeah, because once the entry drivers are out, the API is still going to exist. So these tests should continue to work unaffected. They're a good canary test for nothing to change after.
Okay.
Okay. And another thing I wanted to get help with is I want to run it through SIG testing. So if anybody has any contacts there, I would like them to approve this command option in this job, if it makes sense, or they have better options. I take whole SIG testing on the PR, but got no feedback.
Yeah.
I can try to coordinate with some of the test infra people, and I can also try to look into this regex thing. I feel like you should be able to do what you need without it being so ugly, but let me see.
In parallel, I can do this. Match everything that doesn't contain features, double quote, double column volume. But not in Go.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
Anything else?
Not from my side.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to discuss today? Going once. Going twice.
Jan, you should stop sharing your screen.
Sold.
All right.
All right, now we know who all Jan's friends are. All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.